Hello, my name is Kelly Shiohira, and I'm the director of the Global Science of Learning Education Network. We're an international group of scientists, educationalists, education practitioners, philanthropists, and policymakers who are invested in the better integration of the science of learning into education policy and practice. When we talk about the science of learning, we're focused on the integrated and multidisciplinary study that includes neurobiology, cognitive science, psychology, sociology, cultural studies, and human development that is aimed at developing comprehensive solutions for learning, understanding the way that students learn and understanding how that way students learn can be applied in education context to improve equity and educational outcomes for all learners. I'm joined today by Mathilde Cerioli, who will speak to some of her work at Everyone.AI around the integration of artificial intelligence into education and other processes involved in child development.
Hi, I'm really happy to be here. Thank you so much for having me. So my name is Mathilde Cerioli. I hold a master's degree in psychology and a PhD in cognitive neuroscience, and my focus has always been really on child development and on how we can increase, improve, and encourage learning during my work research. So after that, I've done a lot of consulting for edtech companies, video game companies, with still the same focus on how can we really support children in their development, their cognitive development and their socio-emotional development. And that really led me, especially because I'm within the Silicon Valley, so where AI is really at the forefront of the conversation, to really question and get a specific interest on how we could use AI to improve and support the solutions we are creating for children in the digital space, but also what were some of the risks of some of the pitches I would hear that were a bit more concerning about how AI could interact with children. So we funded, along with three of my amazing co-founders, Everyone.AI. And our whole goal is to really have a multi-expertise approach. So from people within the education system, cognitive neuroscience for me, with an expert in AI as well, to really anticipate the opportunities that come with AI, which is potentially an amazing tool to support children, but also what are the inherent risks that we have when we are creating solutions that are so new and that really change the way we interact with the world and the environment around us. So yeah, that's what we do at Everyone.AI, and we really work on educating different stakeholders, so regulators, to help them really understand what AI can and cannot do when it comes to really being a tool that can help and support children's growth. People who develop solutions for children, and parents. They need guidance. It's a very difficult and complex environment we are in as parents. So what are the use that we want to really encourage, and what are the use and interaction and interface that exist within AI that we might want to stay away from, or when can we start using some specific tools? So yeah.
Introduction to yourself and to the work that you do. I know your organization, Everyone.AI, recently published a report titled The Future of Child Development in the AI Era. And I was in attendance at your webinar in June, where you covered some of the important topics on that report. So for this very brief video, I would just like to focus in on one thing that you presented during that report and see if we can get a little bit more of your insights and details from that.
I'm actually glad because I had so many things I needed to talk about on the report. So I'm glad I get to spend more time on this, which is really to me like the kind of the essence and the main conclusion of the report. And it really came about, so just a bit of more background about what was the report on. It was really like the second part of the title is cross-disciplinary perspective between child development and AI experts. And the idea was really to ask AI experts, okay, what are the products that are coming to shelves in the next 2 to 5 years? What can we technically do? What is likely to come, because it has to be affordable, it has to join the market. And in those uses, then ask child development experts, okay, what's your take on that? What are the products you're like, oh yeah, like that can do so much? And where are the aspects where you worry a bit more, and really like work with them on trying to get as big a picture as we could on the impact on cognition and socio-emotional development for children. And so as I was writing the report, every time I would see like risks that were very specific, that were more like use case, and none of them felt really that dire. Like I was, and I was struggling the whole time because I was like, I'm still worried. And yet if I look in details, everything is kind of okay. And that's only when I got to the end that I was like, the risk is actually not one, but it's really like the cumulative impact. So it's not going to be one change. It's going to be a lot of tiny, teeny changes everywhere. And that really ties it to, in psychology, what we call the dynamic system perspective, which really, it's kind of the butterfly effect. It's not like when you change something, what are the other things that can change down the line that you don't see happening? So that's the first aspect, the unforeseen repercussions. What do we not know? So because we know every behaviors and skills, they are related on one another, they build onto one another. So if you think about sensory integration, what does it look like if you integrate a lot more with tablets? You have less sensory engagement as a young child. Well, then your integration of your senses is not as good, which is then hard to learn fine motor skills, because you kind of need to be able to understand and grasp with your fingers the pressure of objects. So you see children who have issues with sensory processing integration, they struggle to hold a pencil right and to understand the pressure on paper. And then if you keep going, what happens what are the links we see between poor fine motor skills? Well, you see that it actually plays in executive functioning, because first, like they're really close in the brain, like they're toward the front of your brain. But it's also like when you do motor skills, you have to plan your actions, which really relates to executive functioning. And what happens when you have poor executive functioning? Well, that's the biggest measure of success usually. So all of those things, like if you change from the start, what happens? What are the ripple potential effects? And that we don't know. And so that's the really first aspect. The second is that it's going to be cumulative. It's not going to be just one skill. It's going to be all of the skills that are going to be changed just a little, because it's not like children all of a sudden are not going to have any sensory development. It's more like maybe it's going to be a bit weaker. And so what happens when you have that? And then maybe some attention that is a bit lower, or language or social skills. Recognizing like specific facial features and emotion recognition if you have less interaction with other humans. So that's the other aspects of that. When you accumulate all of that, what happens? The first one is that it's longitudinal. It's not going to be once they're 6, it's going to happen. They're going to be born in a world where there is more AI, there is more tech, and it's going to go their whole life. So if you think of a baby, and that you already see that if the TV is on in the room, parents are not as stimulating for their kids, and that's fine. Like we don't have to be always on. That's not what I'm saying, but that already plays on how we interact with our kids. So what happens if we wear a VR headset? And our kids don't see all of our visual expression, because, for instance, if you look at the Apple Vision Pro, you see everything the same way. But what the person sees from you is like just a mask, like kind of a ski mask. So what does the kid see? How do you interact in that? So those are the kind of things that you're going to see like from the day they're born. And then when they grow up, it's going to be a lot more different interaction. So it is the fact that it's their whole trajectory that is being changed. The fourth aspect is that we know that there are individual differences. So the way something impacts me and impacts you and impacts another person is going to be different. So we know that, for instance, and that's already the case, technology doesn't impact children who are neurodivergent the same way as children who are neurotypical. So they are more prone, especially when you think of the ADHD population, they're more prone to addiction. It impacts their attention even more. They need more dopamine, and AI is really good at giving you that shoot of dopamine because it gives you what you want usually. That's why it keeps you engaged. So we know the impact is different for them. So that's one of the examples. But even in the content you're being presented, we know it doesn't impact girls and boys the same way. We know that it also impacts different socioeconomic levels differently because it doesn't feed you the same kind of content. So that can increase potentially some of the inequities that we see already at the moment. And yeah, and that really ties to also environmental influence because it doesn't give you the same elements. So for instance, if you're on YouTube, if you're a boy or a girl, you don't see the same content. Depending on your socioeconomic level, you don't see the same content. So that can further really increase those inequalities. And so it's all of that cumulative that is more worrisome and where we have a bigger role to play. What do we allow AI to do? And how do we make sure like we create a future for children where we keep them safe and we really think before we develop something, it's not because you can develop it, because technically we are able to do, that we should do it. I think that should be the question at the forefront and really always weighing the benefits and consequences, because any use you can see benefits, but are the benefits there and there's a bit of risk, but it's low, or the balance is not that good. So that's really an exercise we have to do. And when I work with at tech companies, for instance, sometimes you have a great idea, like you're excited, you're in the process and you're like, we should do that. And you always think of the best case scenario when people use it well, when you don't consider privacy issues, when you don't consider everything that could go wrong. But sometimes if you ask the question of, okay, let's take that great feature we have in mind, what is the worst case scenario? And you really have to do that mental juggling, because sometimes the worst case scenario is still pretty dim and it's worth it. And sometimes you're like, oh no, like the privacy issues that come from that, the level of monitoring that we put on kids, the potential ripple effects down the lines are too high to go there. So I think it's really a mental work we have to do, because we are having the opportunity to have a tool that's so powerful that it can really go both ways depending on the decision we make and how we apply it.
Thank you so much, Mathilde. I think that this is a really important piece of the conversation that's happening around artificial intelligence in education and artificial intelligence in children at home. Right now, as a parent, I'm experiencing quite a lot of what you've discussed today. So I'm sure that that resonates with quite a lot of our audience as well. Thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate your perspectives. And I encourage everyone to read the full report if you're able. We'll provide a link in the comments.
And for the ones that find the whole report to be a bit lengthy, which it is, there is now an executive summary in English, which is really easier to access and more digestible. So it's also a great way to see the work that's being done at Everyone.AI.
Perfect. So we'll provide a link to the summary as well for those that would like to follow up further. Thank you again, Mathilde. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.